Welcome, everybody. My name is Laila Ollapally. I am the co-founder of CAMP Arbitration and Mediation Practice. I'm delighted to launch our mediation webinar series hosted by CAMP and IDEX Legal. Over the next 3 months, we will discuss a topic related to mediation and collaborative dispute resolution every 2 weeks. So a big shout out to IDEX Legal, to Vikas Vij, Akash and Ria for working with us to make this a reality. Today we have partnered with Edwards Mediation Academy to bring to you a very important discussion on virtual mediation. So online dispute resolution, ODR, is the buzzword today. It truly has immense potential to address many of the woes of our court system. But it's also a big word. It encompasses resolution of low value, high volume disputes like e-commerce type cases. And it's also now branched out into high value commercial disputes. And today's discussion is with leading commercial mediators who, up until COVID, had very bespoke practices that was barely online. But today they've all become expert online mediators. So this discussion will be focused on how online mediation, which is popularly now termed as virtual mediations for these kind of matters, are panning out for complex commercial disputes. To quickly introduce our speakers, it's truly my privilege to have a very, very eminent panel. Truly, it does not get very much better than this. Our speaker moderator is Bruce Edwards. He's one of the most experienced commercial mediators of our times. Bruce started as a professional mediator in 1985 when probably mediation as a profession did not really exist. So in large part, he has played an instrumental role in creating this profession of mediators. Bruce has mediated over 7,000 disputes, most of them complex commercial disputes. He's played a foundational role in setting up JAMS, which is one of the most successful ADR companies in the world. And now Bruce and his wife, Susan, have also started Edwards Mediation Academy, where they bring high quality online mediation courses from the perspective of experienced mediators sharing their knowledge of mediation to the world. So thank you so much, Bruce, for being with us today and for hosting this discussion.
Thank you, Tara, and for the kind introduction.
Thank you. We also have Mr. Sriram Panchu. Mr. Panchu does not need much introduction, popularly known as the godfather of mediation in India. Mr. Panchu set up the first court annex mediation program with the Chennai High Court or the Madras High Court in 2005. Mr. Panchu has mediated innumerable disputes. We all know him as the mediator of the Ayodhya dispute. He's also a very senior, well-respected member of the bar. Mr. Panchu has published many, many books, including most recently one on the commercial mediation monograph. So thank you, Mr. Panchu, for being part of us, for being part of this discussion. And we're excited to listen to all the experience that you've had in this space.
Thank you, Tara. Pleasure to be here, especially with Bruce and Laila.
And we also have Laila Ollapally, who in full disclosure is also my mother. Laila is the founder of CAMP Arbitration and Mediation Practice, which is a pioneering private mediation institution here in Bangalore. Laila was a lawyer for nearly 2 decades with the Karnataka High Court and the Supreme Court of India up until she encountered mediation. In 2007, she was the founding coordinator of the Bangalore Mediation Center. Again, a very successful court annex mediation program, and she served as the founding coordinator up until 2012. She's been a full-time mediator since 2012. In 2015, set up CAMP, and her focus, along with all of us at CAMP, is to get mediation as part of the default option when it comes to disputants. So over to you, Bruce. Over to you, Bruce. Thank you all for being part of this panel, and we're looking forward to this very engaging discussion. To all our viewers, you can please send out questions on the chat inbox. We will be manning it, and there will be a point midway through, a little beyond the midway mark, where we will open up some of the questions that we have received to pose it to our panelists. So over to you, Bruce. Thank you for hosting and moderating this discussion.
Thank you, Tara, again for the kind introduction. It's indeed my sincere pleasure to be with the viewers, and particularly with my dear friends, Sriram and Laila. It's just a joy to continue the effort we're all making collectively in India to discuss mediation topics and bring mediation in its finest forms to India. Today we have the pleasure really of talking about mediating commercial disputes in the age of COVID-19. So let me start by wishing everybody well. I hope people are in all good health and your families are doing well in these difficult times. I think it's probably best to start to question for our panel, which is really the why question. And one of my good friends who is a psychotherapist and mediation trainer always tells me that if you start with the why question and you understand the why, the how will follow. And so why are we here today? And why is it that, Laila, I'll start with you, that this is such a hot topic in India, the topic of online dispute resolution. And let me hear your thoughts on that initially this morning or this evening.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. It's such a delight to be with all of you. Yes, mediation is new in India. It's taking its baby steps.
That's fine.
We know mediation to be a process that uses communication, that builds communication and helps parties to negotiate, coach parties to negotiate productively. And today, mediation is being acclaimed as a good process for multi-party, multi-issue, complex disputes, high emotions. So we are in a good place. And as Tara said, now ODR is a buzzword. ODR, as we understand, as is popularly understood now, is dispute resolution using technology. To what extent does it build communication? To what extent does it enter into complex coaching? As we hear of it, it's for low value, high volume disputes, for e-commerce disputes. And I'm sure this can develop, evolve to build in all that we are seeking in mediation. But now it is important to bring clarity. How do we use technology? For which disputes? How can we tailor it to the dispute that we are seeking to resolve? So I think that clarity is important. And if we don't bring that clarity, we may throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we just have to be careful. And that's why I think this is a very important discussion, Bruce.
Thank you, Laila. I like your topic about clarity, and you remind me that it might be helpful for us to define terms. Let me define a term or two as we use it in the United States and see if that resonates with your practice and experience as well. In its simplest form, as you've just pointed out so well, ODR really simply means alternative dispute resolution plus technology in some form. And we'll talk over the next hour or so about how that's evolved and in what forms. We're now in the COVID-19 environment in the United States, I think, shifting in commercial cases to use of the word virtual mediation to really signify mediation in the context of a visual environment such as we are right now. And over the course of the next hour, I'm sure we'll have opportunity to define additional and related terms, but those are how at least I use the terms as we move forward. Sriram, does that match up with your experience in terms of the terminology? And then I have a question for you.
I have a strong point of disagreement with you, Bruce.
Good place to start.
I'm fine with the use of ODR, online dispute resolution, through the use of technology. But I think to use the term virtual mediation for conducting mediation online is to underrate online mediation. I think, in fact, online mediation is turning out to be a superior form of mediation. I would say enhanced mediation. I would say superior enhanced mediation.
I like that.
Because it really enables us to bring out the full capacity of mediation techniques. And it enables us to bring in maximum levels of efficiency and contact and communication.
I'm going to come back to.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
No, I interrupted you. I apologize.
So, so I think we are able, through online mediation, we're able to deliver mediation to the last, to the last digit. I think it's a method which is tailor-made to mediation, and I'm delighted to be able to use this. I have used online mediation even before COVID started, but since COVID came, I've shifted my entire practice to online. And mind you, I don't think I have a moment to spare.
Wow.
Because
I want to come back to that.
Yes, yes. So whenever you're going to come back, I have lots of things to say about online mediation, and because I just love it.
Fabulous. That's a great introduction. I always find in these conversations about using technology in mediation that it is important to spend a moment emphasizing the value of mediation skills as a prerequisite to being able to work fluently and effectively online. Sriram is one of the leading mediation instructors in your country. Can you just take a moment and comment on that importance of sort of mastering the mediation skills as a prerequisite to moving into an online environment?
Of course, I think you have to be fundamentally a good mediator to start with. There's no two ways about that. Yes, you cannot make up for any lack of a mediation technique or mediation knowledge or mediation skills by thinking you can use the online process. So you have to start out by being, yes, a good mediator. So you must, hone in your skills, do your groundwork as a mediator, acquire the experience, acquire the training, co-mediate, reflect, learn how to mediate. And then, as I said, online gives you this wonderful additional capacity to leverage your skills to the maximum. But there's no doubt that, you must start off by being the best mediator you can.
Thank you for emphasizing that point. I think it's bears repeating that mediation skills are what allow us to work effectively in an online environment, and technology will not overcome for skill deficiency. Yeah. Let's talk for just a moment about the history of how we've gotten to this point in time so that we can best understand the trajectory moving forward. As Laila pointed out so well, in the United States, in the 1990s, ODR, online dispute resolution, began really under the guidance of a gentleman named Colin Rule. And for those of you who are not familiar with Colin Rule, I urge you to Google him and read some of his works. He's written for various Harvard publications. But in the 1990s, he was hired by eBay to set up an online dispute resolution program. And as Laila said, the characteristics of that program were, because of the nature of eBay's online transaction or e-commerce business, the online dispute resolution program was set up to manage conflicts arising between buyers and sellers of products online. And that really evolved then into a situation where they mediated literally millions of fairly simplistic, small dollar, high volume disputes. And then it began from there, moving to PayPal, moving to other large corporations. And I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, I began to witness a debate in the mediation profession about the value of online dispute resolution. And for many who came to this profession in the United States out of a pure motivation, a belief that in-person intervention was at the soul of mediation, and that to effectively communicate and deal with emotions and other things, online dispute resolution was a distant cousin to what we aspired to. And that was a debate that raged for a number of years in the United States. And then over time, we saw things develop around the world. We saw brick and mortar courtrooms in the United Kingdom and in Canada being replaced completely with online dispute resolution. In the Netherlands, the divorce court began completely to become an online dispute resolution protocol. And then for those of us that sort of stood quietly on the sidelines, not particularly comfortable with technology, in the last 5 years, our commercial practices started to evolve as well. And more we began to use alternate forms of communication in our mediation effort, including texting and phone calls and emails and Zoom and Skype connections with people, to a point where there were days I would start a mediation with 15 or 20 people, only to find a few coming physically into my office, and the rest I would have to engage using some different technology. So over the last few years, technology has been the fourth party in the room. And so it's not now in the United States any longer a binary choice. Are we using technology or not? It is really a question of what is the most effective use of that technology. So that's how things have evolved in the United States. I'm curious, Laila and Sriram, about your experience and witnessing a similar kind of growth in India. Sriram, let me start with you with that question. How would you describe the evolution of online dispute resolution in India, recognizing you're still in the throes of it?
All right. Very quickly, a recap. I think India's mediation isn't as long tenured as it is in the United States. For us, effectively, we started off in 2005 with our first court-IDEX center. But we moved very rapidly since then. And across the country now, we have a few thousand mediators mediating millions of cases, but basically under the court-IDEX scheme. This is the time now we're moving on to open up mediation to private professional practice. There are, as I say, 4 factors which have happened recently, which are propelling mediation to center stage. And I call them the 4 beneficial horsemen of the apocalypse, to avert the apocalypse. The first is the Singapore Convention, which has opened out to big business the clarity that they can now engage in mediation settlements with the utmost confidence that if there's ever a dispute about implementation, they can have implementation for the asking in any part of the world which is a signatory to the convention. And they have it for the asking without questions being asked. The court will just enforce it, which is such a change, huge change from arbitration and litigation. The second is India's, almost revolutionary, I would say, introduction. What is it? The second is India's revolutionary introduction of the concept of pre-institution mediation. There is mandatory mediation before you file a commercial case, tempered somewhat by the relaxation that if you needed an interim order, you could still file. But over time, that will become a little tighter, so that our law will now mandate a prior mediation to institution of a court. And that is huge, both in concept and in practice. The third is, I think, the likely emergence now of a comprehensive mediation legislation, which will cover all areas of practice, procedure, and institutions, court-annexed, private, cross-border, implementation, ethics, guidelines, everything. So far, we've had scattered mediation laws, bits and pieces all over the place. Now we're framing a comprehensive enactment, tailored towards mediation. That's a huge step. And the fourth horseman is online brought about by COVID. Because, and if I may take a minute here, Bruce, I'd just like to say that this is giving us a level of both instant and constant engagement with parties. And I'll explain that. Instant engagement. My eyes were open one day because I got a call at 8:30 in the evening from a party saying, you know, we have a huge contract going on and it's going to be canceled tonight. What can we do? I said, it depends whether you can get everybody onto a telephone, onto a Zoom call. There were 9:30, we had people from six cities spread across different countries, 6 parties and 3 legal advisors, 9 people from different cities, all. By 11:30, we kind of averted the disaster. And over the next 3 days, till the end of the week, we could sort it out. And I had that CEO call me on Sunday, and he said, I am amazed. In the old days, I would have taken this much time to even explain to my lawyer what my problem was in order to issue a notice and get a stay from a court. And today, we have resolved this issue, all of us sitting together in a matter of 4 days. We've resolved it. And, you know, this is, he couldn't believe it, you know, frankly, this happened like this. And the other thing is a level of constant engagement. I'm just in a mediation, which I'm doing for a family in North India, 4 brothers and 2 sisters, where they have disputes about vast amounts of properties. And they've been fighting for years and years and years. And I have sat with them for the last 3 months on an almost daily basis to get them to agreement and implement it. And there is no way I could have done that. You know, I'm based in Chennai. I couldn't have even run that mediation. But today I've been able to get them to a point where they are like, you know, home and dry, they're through. And that's because of online mediation. How else, you know, will I sit with the party, you know, different, and they are in multiple cities themselves. You know, 3 months, brick by brick by brick. And I now think that I look back at my earlier mediations and I think if I had online, I would cut short that time, it would be a 20/80. What took me 80 days, I would do in 20. You know, so the speed, the level of engagement is amazing. The other thing which matters is, you see, I'm finding that for complex commercial matters, you need multiple levels of mediator engagement. Some matters, it's adequate to get a breakthrough. And then the parties will work it on their own from then on. But there are other matters where the mediator has to stay with the parties even after you get that basic agreement, you know, to see it through, to stay the full course. And that's very difficult for us if we don't have online. It's virtually impossible. But it makes a lot of difference to the parties, I'm finding. Not only does it give them this maximum comfort with mediators with us, but as we all know, in commercial matters, the devil is often in the details. And it's when the details are going through that that devil pops up, you know, to just scuttle the entire agreement. And if the parties have their mediator with them to sort it out, you know, there's nothing like it. The third is, I think, when parties have a trusted mediator, you know, you give them an online procedure, they make use of that trust in the mediator. And ever so often you will have parties saying, look, you know, I think this is how it should be. I'm willing to go to 50. The other guy says, you know, 100, even in implementation, you know, sorting out the finer points. And they'll say, look, you know, we can't really sort this out. Let's just call Mr. Panchu and say, you know this whole thing. Come on, let's help us see through. So even in the level of, you know, taking it down, and all complex commercial matters, you know, are agreement, you break through, you structure it, and then you have to implement it, you know, see it through stage 1, 2, 3. So for all these reasons, and clients are loving it. They can't believe they have something like this. They're loving it. In another question, I'll tell you about how the legal community is taking to it. But as far as the parties are concerned, this is manna from heaven.
Those are great examples, vivid examples of the power and potential of online dispute resolution. Thank you for sharing those. Laila, let me turn to you for a moment in terms of your experience with online dispute resolution, what you're hearing from others in the mediation community as you at CAMP work to educate people and offer mediation services. What do you see from your vantage point about what's going on in the world of online dispute resolution? And you'll need to unmute your mic. There we go.
So, Bruce, I totally agree with Sriram that we've really reached a good place. And I want to tell you that it evolved. And like there is, there is the opportunity in adversity. This is what COVID has brought to us. In 2011, when I was a visiting scholar at Stanford, Colin Rule had come to talk about online dispute resolution. At that time, I was already a mediator for a few years. And when I listened to him, it really didn't make sense to me. I thought, not for the kind of cases that I'm mediating. Subsequently, in 2018, Agami promoted mediation in India, online mediation. And many platforms came up. We had Sama, Coda. Again, I didn't think CAMP was really going to be doing that kind of mediation. When COVID happened, we at CAMP knew that we had to adapt. We have to modify our practice a bit. We have to bring in the same experience that we were giving our parties earlier online. When parties, we used the screen, the online technologies, parties have to feel the same kind of connection, the same ease and comfort. So there was a lot of work that we had to do at CAMP to make this happen. All of us mediators, we did training in Zoom, training in the correct platform, and we sat for hours, days in fact. How do we adapt our existing techniques to make it conducive to the online world? And today, if you ask me for an analogy, I think of a carriage being drawn by two very strong horses. The carriage is mediation, and the horses, one is the mediator's mediation skills, and the other is the mediator's ability to handle technology. When both these are equally powerful in a mediator, then you get the best experience online. And I call that virtual mediation. You're virtually making them feel that they are having all the connection, all the ease and comfort on screen, which they would have otherwise felt if it was a face-to-face mediation. And obviously, Sriram is doing it. Sriram has, with his skills of mediation, he has been able to adapt and modify and bring in the same experience. And my request to all the mediators is to be aware, when you come online, the two houses need to be equally skilled and equally powerful.
That is a great analogy, Laila, a great visual for us to remember. Let me pause us all on the panel for just a moment. We've promised this to be an interactive program, and I would like to invite us to put on the screen by our friends at IDEX Legal one of several questions that we want to gauge the audience's response to over the course of the next hour. And so if I could ask them to put a question up on the screen that we're going to ask our audience to respond to at this point, that would be much appreciated. And the question, for those of you who may not have your reading glasses on this evening, How many virtual mediations have you experienced so far?
Okay.
And the choices are none, less than 5, between 5 and 10, or greater than 10. So take a moment and just respond to that. Obviously, we're just trying to gauge the audience response, not any individual. And that will give us a snapshot of where things stand in your experience, which we're very interested in learning. In mediation, this is what we call the power of silence. Okay, that's enough time, I think, for a fairly straightforward question and answer sequence. If our friends at IDEX Legal wish to post the responses that they've accumulated, that would be good. So you can see from the responses that the vast majority of people have not yet experienced virtual or online mediation, almost 60%. And another 28% have done less than 5 or fewer than 5. So that is really 86% of people who have done either none or less than 5, suggesting to me that we are just getting started in this process for many. And only 6% have done more than 10 and find themselves in Sriram's world. Let's talk for just a minute about sort of what I think Sriram was introducing us to, which is, can this be effective? And I'll just offer this anecdote from my own company. As Tara was kind enough to mention, my company, not mine alone, but the company that I help work with, JAMS, we're the largest provider of mediation services commercially in the United States. And we are about a $200 million enterprise in the United States. And since March, I'm happy to report, because there were times where I wasn't sure we would ever be able to say this, but I would say at this point we are about 80% online in terms of our mediation, predominantly mediation, and some arbitration practice. And that's quite a statement to say that in 6 months, we can go from a company that was engaged in over 16,000 disputes a year with over 400 mediators to pivot that quickly to an online virtual environment. Also recognizing, and I can say this because you all are 7,000 miles away, most of my colleagues are in a demographic where technology does not come easily. And there's an awful lot of quick learning that was required. Personally, I was in the middle of a 2-day mediation involving over 20 parties that were in my office when our office manager came in at the end of the first day and said, our local government, our mayor, said we're a non-essential business and need to shut down at 5 o'clock, and everybody was sent home. And I immediately went home and got online and started learning about how to Zoom mediation so I could continue my mediation the next day. And it was that thrown into the fire kind of moment for many of us that characterized our transition to this virtual world. But let's talk more specifically, I think, now that we've all set the stage. Sriram, what does it take in this online mediation world for you to be effective? What is it about the online process that works so well? And you've already begun this conversation, but in contrast to your prior life of traveling around and working with people in person, what does make this virtual program so effective? Go ahead and turn your microphone on so we can make sure we hear you.
Thank you, Bruce. First, I would suggest that you tell your mayor that mediation is an essential practice. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, essential service.
Yeah.
So what makes for the efficiency of an online mediation? I think that's a great question. I think you have to spend some time educating parties and lawyers on how it's going to work. They may come from a non-comfort zone, from a non-knowledge zone. So I think one very important session is to explain to them that this is going to be as good, if not better. And I always stress, we can make it much, much better than the old system. And this is how it works. This is how we will be communicating. These are the tools you need. This is how in fact, I would run some practice sessions with them. A mediation associate would take them through the ropes, parties and lawyers, till they get comfortable with, their laptops, the Zoom system, the interactions, the chat rooms, putting them into different rooms, structuring the whole thing. So they need that measure of knowledge and that comfort. Okay. When we draft the agreements of mediation, we need to pay special attention to certain aspects of confidentiality, because I'm not there present with them to ensure that there's nobody else in the room at a certain time. Presence of parties. So they need to be, enter into certain covenants of confidentiality, that they will not be recording a session where we do not agree on recording, that they will not covertly record. So there is something that needs to be taken care of there on a legal angle. We then, we set out a process note to them, a very detailed process note saying this is how the mediation will run. And, come back with whatever questions and clarifications. So I think good part, that preparation is a big part of the whole thing. The second is the technology. And I like using a nice wide screen for my mediation. So I've attached, and I'm just giving you some practical,
Please.
tips. I've attached to my laptop, I've attached a wide screen. So when I have this wide screen and when I can zone in on a party who's speaking, I get the full display of facial emotions as I would were I sitting across. So I'm not losing anything on, reading emotions, reading reactions, body language, reading a twitch of the eye or a sudden stiffening of the face. I don't lose anything. So that wide screen enables me to make up this gap between, doing it on screen and actually being there. Thirdly, I've invested some time and resources in getting a good mic system so that, I'm heard and I can hear well. I've also invested time in getting feedback from people. I've come to realize that your communication in a virtual mediation is different from what it is across the table. And one of the things I realized was that until I adjusted my camera, I found that I would be speaking looking down, because I would be looking on the eyes of the person, but the camera was on top of the laptop, so I would actually be looking down all the time. So it took me that feedback to make me realize that I must adjust the camera differently, so that I'm at all times meeting the eye of the person with whom I'm speaking. I also realized that I have to articulate differently. That your articulation in a closed room, face-to-face, is different from the articulation on screen. And you have to articulate differently. These are all things one picked up, over experience. And you ask people for feedback. So there are some finer points, of the game, which of course, as we evolve and we share it, people will get to know. So I think one pays attention to this. I will also tell you an interesting aspect, because I used to hear it said that, your participants will miss, they'll feel uncomfortable about this screen online mediations. On the contrary, I think people feel very comfortable and secure from the confines of their houses. And this has nothing to do with COVID. Mind you, we get people who we are mediating very difficult portions of their lives, whether it's a broken marriage or a broken commercial engagement. It may be people who've been in a partnership firm for 20, 40 years, as much as a long-term marriage, and to negotiate a breakage of a relationship is a very distressing situation. I find that talking from the confines of their homes, they actually feel easier. Not having to bear the hostility of a one-to-one contact in a room, but actually feeling easier, more comfortable, more relaxed, and more willing, to open up. So to me, this is an eye-opener on many fronts. So I think the thing I want to convey is that being open to the fact that this is a different medium. And you have to adapt and learn and innovate and think about the fact that this is a different medium. What do I need to be doing to make myself as effective as possible?
Those are excellent points, Sriram. And what I like especially about them is your attention to the detail, the simple things like making sure your camera eye level is consistent for communication. This idea of people's comfort level aided by the fact they're coming to you from their home. I recently mediated a case involving a young man who had been in a motorcycle accident and was paralyzed from the chest level down. And we were able to engage him from his hospital bed in his living room. And not only did it make him more comfortable, but I think it gave everybody in the mediation a vivid picture, literally, of what his life was like in any given moment, surrounded by equipment, surrounded by caretakers, one could even get, and one does get in the broader context, just a snapshot of someone's life by seeing how they decorate their home in the background. And there is an element of being able to connect.
True, very true, very true.
Laila, let me turn to you for a moment. In terms of those kinds of suggestions, do you want to build on Sriram, or do you want to take on the question of what challenges you see or hear from people as they contemplate moving into a virtual or enhanced mediation world, to use Sriram's term? You'll need to undo your mic.
Sriram has well covered the finer points. I just maybe want to add 1 or 2 points to it. I think now with the virtual online situation, it enables a mediator to think, to design very broad and think creatively. I did a virtual mediation where the average age of the parties was 80. And they were located in 3 different countries, 5 different cities. So I just didn't know how I'm going to connect with these people, get them to participate effectively. And then what we did was we included the children of these people. And of course, we have the time buddy. We created schedules that the children, they were all busy doctors and lawyers, but they could make 1 or 2 hours available. We brought them all into the mediation, and that made it possible for this older generation to participate and resolve the dispute. So I think, the ability to be creative and to think broad has increased. Another point I realized in virtual mediation, the attention span of people on screen is not too much. They have not committed a day to mediation. They have not braved the Bangalore traffic. So when they, when they do all that, they're ready to take a little more time and give a little more time. But when it is on the screen, they click the button, they are there. They want it efficient, they want it productive, they want it quick. I feel we can become more strategic and more focused for each session. The lawyers and the parties are guided to be more strategic and more efficient.
Very right.
Yeah.
That's, I think, well said. And let's talk about that for just a moment. I think you've put your finger on an aspect of all of us, which is our attention spans. We know from neurobiology that the sort of optimal time for specific focus and concentrated learning is about only 90 minutes, which has grave implications for those of us who are used to having people in 8 or 10-hour sessions. And one of the things I've experienced, I'll be interested in yours, is I'm doing much more of these multiple sessions, shorter 2, 3, 4-hour sessions spread out over days than I am the longer full day, 8 or 10-hour exhausted.
Yeah.
Sriram, is that true for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. In the old days, I would have had to go to Bangalore or Delhi, you know, park myself in a hotel and had to run sessions from morning to night because, you know, I'm coming from outside, other parties will be coming from outside. And it used to be, you know, a hugely draining process. It also would kind of, you know, push you to try and conclude matters. It sometimes didn't give you the flexibility of time, especially when parties said, look, sir, I've got a flight to take back to the United States tomorrow, I have to leave tonight. So there were a lot of constraints. Now you don't have any of that. I can simply say, well, we're going to sit for 3 hours today, and we're going to make as much progress as we can. And then I'm going to give you each some homework. I want you to reflect on some things. I want you to work out some options. I want to break up some of you into different groups to talk about this, and we'll reconvene tomorrow. It is just so easy. You know, so as Laila said, you're able to strategize it better. You're able to handle, you know, the requirement to suit what that case needs. And a lot, I think now we're moving to a process, I was just thinking about it this evening, where I think the mediator is becoming not just the person who is able to move them from conflict to a resolution, but also I think the mediator is now becoming somebody with the aided capability of actually managing the implementation of that solution to the extent that may be required in particular cases. Some cases may need nothing. Some cases may actually need a level of intervention and I would say grip. See, parties like the grip the mediator brings in.
Yes.
You know, when you've taken them up to that point, and then, you know, they have to go ahead and implement, the fact that we use the term judges retain seisin of the case. I think with online, mediators can retain seisin of the dispute and actually see them, you know, down to the end of that, you know, it's to that marathon race.
I think my impression of what you're saying is consistent with my own experience, meaning rather than just a surgical intervention, a doctor coming into the operating room, you're now greeting them at the front door of the hospital and you're wheeling them out at the back end of their stay in a wheelchair to their car and calling them up the next day at their home to find out how they're doing. And it's that what we call sort of soup to nuts intervention. Yeah,
it's full end, you know, full end, right, full end.
Yeah. Let's shift gears for just a moment, because as we all know, we are not, as mediators, the only people in the room. And another important group of stakeholders that need to be addressed and discussed are the attorneys representing the clients. I'm curious, Laila, why do you think this conversation is important regarding what we describe as the lawyers as stakeholders in mediation? And what do you want them to know about this process from your perspective as a mediator?
Bruce, from my experience, I feel today the lawyers play an even more important role, because we are dealing with parties who have tremendous anxiety. They have anxiety about technology, anxiety about mediation process. Most of them have never done a mediation prior to this. So all that we teach in advocacy, in mediation, really becomes important. You know, the importance of forming a professional team is is very high. The lawyers with their parties and the mediator are working towards the same goal. The lawyers need to understand the facts. They are coming in for these sessions more strategic, more focused. What exactly is it that the parties want? What is the factual position on this? What is the legal? What are the underlying concerns? What are the options? Lawyers are much more involved. How are their parties feeling? In one mediation, again, the same 80, average age 80 mediation, I told the lawyers, please alert me if you notice your parties are tiring. I'm keeping my telephone next to me, send me a message. So they are keeping their finger on the pulse, and they know that's their responsibility. And they have several more discussions with their parties. As Sriram said, they're given homework. They are asked to come prepared. So they interact much more with their parties to come prepared, focused, strategic for the next session. So I feel the lawyers really have a very important role to play. The skills in mediation, of advocacy in mediation and advocacy in litigation are very different. It's more marked when it's online. Any kind of aggression can bring in more toxicity on an online medium than on a physical medium, is what I feel.
I like your logistical invitation to set up alternate channels of communication to overcome people's fear of being isolated somehow in the technology. And I will inevitably, when I'm mediating on the main screen, I will have my other computer, set up at my side. I will have my text capability set up with the phone and invite people to reach out to me to, as Sriram says, provide feedback on the communication. If there are things they want to share confidentially, sometimes I'm in a meeting and they'll say, stop talking, or this is, not working to our advantage. Let's move into private session. Whatever the moment is, you have these alternate channels of communication, and you point that out so well. Sriram, speak to that same topic, that is the lawyer's role in mediation and what you see them needing to do, those that do things well. What are those things, those that miss an opportunity in your mind's eye? What is that missed opportunity?
Yeah, I think this is a hugely important topic, and it's good to hear Laila say what she said. Let's address one thing, right up front. Lawyers have a principal fear about mediation. Is it going to take away my revenue? Does ADR translate itself into alarming drop of revenue? If Mr. Panchu says that he will start a dispute which has blossomed on Tuesday night and close it on Sunday afternoon, what the hell does this do for my fees in this huge $1 million case, which could have dragged on, for virtual eternity? The lawyer is going to be thinking that. And unless we as mediators, and unless the systems, the structure, and the law do not provide those answers, mediation will not take off. Because you cannot expect clients to come to the table without lawyers. And you cannot expect lawyers, to survive in an atmosphere where they think that mediation is loaded with disincentives against them. But here's the good news. If you apply your mind as a mediator, you come up with a solution for that. What does our mediation training tell us? It tells us when there is a problem, look for options. Look for long-term interest and look for options. And the answer is very simple. The long-term interest of the client and the long-term interest of the lawyer in fact getting a good settlement should be made convergent. And that translates very simply into telling the client, please work out a proper financial structure with your lawyers for the mediation. Your lawyers are giving you a first-class professional service. And I emphasize this to the clients in every first meeting. I make it very clear that mediation, not only is mediation professional, but the service the lawyer is giving the client is a professional service. For one, it is not only professional, it is hugely important. Even though the client may be the decision, the lawyer's role is hugely important. It's a professional service, and it is something to which the lawyer must be, well compensated in revenue. And sometimes I just take the CEO aside and say, look, let's be clear. Make sure that your lawyer is on the same page with you. Put yourself in the feet of the lawyer. You'll want to be compensated for the work you're doing for a client. And often the CEO asks me, what do you suggest? And I said, my suggestion is simple. Calculate what this will take you if you're going in for a full-fledged trial. Will it cost you $1 million for a full-fledged trial? Whatever it costs you. Take a reasonable percentage of that. 25, 30, whatever percentage is reasonable. Tell your lawyer that if he gets you a first-rate settlement, he's going to get that money up front now. This benefits you because you have saved the balance of that legal fee. Your lawyer is ecstatic because, instead of having to earn this money over God knows how many years, and as sometimes lawyers tell me, sir, he says, nobody can think long-term in my profession. I don't know whether the client will stay, whether the cause will stay, or whether I will stay. So if I'm getting good money up front, there's nothing like it. So I tell the client, make sure this benefits your lawyer. You see, at the end of the day, when the client has that huge settlement, the legal fees don't really matter to him. Please understand one thing. The legal fee is a very small component of that settlement. So when you tell him, and he's happy about the settlement, and when you say, measure your lawyer's fees properly and reward your lawyer well, he's happy to do it. I've never seen, and lawyers tell me this, they come back and say, sir, this is amazing. And tell me in COVID times, I've had lawyers come to me and say, sir, we find this amazing because in these COVID times, for our litigative work, our standard clients are complaining about our bills. The kind of bills which were passed through earlier, without comment or comeback, they're now saying, why don't you reduce this by half, whatever. We're having great difficulty with our standard litigation bills. But he says, I have no difficulty with the bills that I have to charge a client for a successful mediation. They are delighted at the result. They're happy to pay my bills. So we need to tailor advice to parties. We need to structure things, and we need to make sure, see, that lawyer is putting in, the lawyer has to prepare for the case. He's got to know the case as well as he knows any litigated case. The lawyer has to sit down and plan with the client what the strategy is. The lawyer has to participate, and they have to work out with the client, who takes the lead step in this phase, who takes the lead step in the next phase. And the lawyer has got to be involved every inch of the way in, fashioning the agreement, the implementation. It's hugely professional, very specialized. And when you explain this to the client, you see, the lawyer explaining it, the client's not going to get it so well. But if I tell him, look, this is crucially important, and unless your lawyer is on the same page, you may not get a good enough settlement. That's all it needs for the mediator to tell the client that. The rest of it is done.
I want to just build on that. I'm so glad, Sriram, tonight that you brought up an issue that often gets skirted in the conversation about mediation. And as I travel around the world and try and help implement mediation in different countries, it is essential that we engage the big stakeholder group of attorneys. This conversation around the value proposition of mediation and how we align historical attorney fee structures to incentivize both lawyers and clients to pursue and engage mediation is essential to our long-term success. When one, like you say, when one really drills down on the value of a skilled mediation advocate and the value they can bring to their client, it demands sort of a different concept or paradigm of pay structure. And so I encourage people in their own communities to revisit those conversations and think about how to align the lawyer's interest, because as we all know on this panel, training lawyers to effectively participate in mediation is almost as essential as training mediators at the end of the table. I want to do this for a moment because we promised everyone this would be an interactive program. I see the question and answer box is sort of flashing lights. I'd like to maybe take a question or two for our panels and see what's on people's minds as they listen to Sriram and Laila and myself. Tara, will you be kind enough to assist us in picking a question or two for the panel?
Yes, Bruce, my pleasure. Yes, there have been lots of questions, and I do want to let everyone know that we will get to as many of them as possible. In the event that we're not able to cover your question, we will send out an email response to you. So please be assured that even if we don't get to your question right now, we will answer it via email. Bruce, how would you like me to do it? One question at a time, or could I bunch up a couple of questions together?
If the questions form under a similar topic, you can read one or two of them together, and then we can invite Laila and Sriram to respond.
Okay. So one question that has been raised a couple of times is to get the clarification between an online mediation and a virtual mediation. So how does this panel see? Is there a difference between online mediation and virtual mediation? If there is, if you could highlight that. Another question that I'll also pose before you that came up a couple of times in different forms is how are parties responding to an online dispute resolution, especially from a confidentiality perspective, and what are some of the steps that mediators are taking to be able to effectively prepare clients and lawyers to engage in a mediation process?
Great. Sriram, do you want to begin by addressing your, well, let me do this. I think we can dispense fairly quickly with the definitional part by revisiting it. And then I want to turn to Laila and Sriram for the substantive. Online dispute resolution encompasses a whole range of various technologies, from the early days of people just using keystrokes and a narrative back and forth without any visual engagement. And that's online dispute resolution. The virtual world, as I refer to it, or the enhanced world, as Sriram has called it, has really involved platforms more like Zoom, where you have the opportunity to visually interact with people on the platform. And yet they're all fall under the heading of online dispute resolution, which I remind you, I define most broadly as ADR plus some form of technology. So, but I'd like to, in the time we have, get to some of the substance of that question. Sriram, did you want to take on the more substantive aspects of the question Tara raised?
I think I've answered, a good part of that question. Okay. When I spoke about preparing the client for mediation, making sure that they got the technology right, sending them a process note, adjusting, choosing technology well. So perhaps that question came in before I spoke.
Yes.
I don't know. I thought I'd answer that question. What more would I like to say on that? I think you must, that comfort level, spend as much time as is necessary on it with the clients and the attorneys. Sometimes mediators, mediators can rush through opening statements. I mean, this is the opening statement 10 times magnified in importance, because you must make them completely conversant and comfortable with the technology and the process, and start it only when they're comfortable, and make it clear to them that, look, if they slip up, it's not a problem. You're not going to get upset with them. It's a new thing. It's new for everybody. So that max level of comfort, I think one should aim for. But I think once they see how it works, they all come into it pretty well.
Good.
I've never seen it, even whether it's families or whatever age groups. I mean, I have a 90-year-old who's merrily chatting with me. She's the mother of those kids in that in that mediation. And I keep telling her, I said, ma'am, why don't you go and take some rest? There's no need for you to be on this call. All your children are here. That's enough. And she says, no, I'm quite happy to be here. So they all get it. It's like I frankly, if I'm telling you, you'll come to a stage where online mediation will become so much the in thing that one day somebody will tell a real-time mediation that, oh, you're virtual mediation.
Laila, how about you? And turn your microphone on. Do you have thoughts about how to make people more comfortable or respond to that question?
Yeah, pretty much what, sorry, pretty much what Sriram said, just reduce their tension, anxiety levels. So they signed to a confidentiality agreement, which will really lay out how it works in the online field. Then I might, tell them, what are your concerns? Let's address it. If your concerns are about recording happening, I'm going to be controlling the recording. So I'll make sure that nobody records. And please disclose if there's anybody else who's, listening in. I keep ensuring that there is comfort on that. And then I tell them, see, now we have everybody there. We use the locking facility so nobody else can come in. And for private sessions, I send different separate links. So it's not, honestly, I don't use too much of the waiting room. I send separate links for Zoom. So they are sure that this link is only for them. And I explain, if you want, we can purge the documents. So I just explain the facilities that are available so that they are totally at ease. And we continue to work with them until they feel comfortable. Yeah.
You have so many valuable tips. I just encourage the both of you to continue a webinar series,
Bruce,
including.
may I add
Yes,
to
please.
this answer?
Please.
There is one huge advantage that online mediation gives me in conducting a mediation. Earlier on, when I had contentious parties who would all keep shouting all the time and I had to raise my voice to control them, now it is brilliantly easy. I just mute them.
A
So
power
simple.
that we never had in the past.
That's it. I just mute them and say, there you are, It's brilliant.
Let me do this. As we near the conclusion of our time, I would like to learn a little more from our audience. And I know we have another question to raise to find out more about how people have been using online dispute resolution so far. And if our friends from IDEX Legal could put a next question on the board for people to answer about the context of online dispute resolution. There it is. And the question reads, in what context do you see virtual mediations working effectively? And the choices for this question are family law, community disputes, commercial or civil litigation, or some other forum. Please take a minute and just give us your answers, because we like to learn from you as we move through this as well.
Difficult to say. Community.
Okay, I think everybody should have had a chance to identify their response. And if you could put the responses up, we'll look at them together. Okay, so,
Right.
wow, that is interesting. Family law is 25%, community disputes 4%, and the vast majority at this point, 70%, is commercial or civil litigation.
Yeah.
That surprises me
Yeah.
a bit. Laila, what's your thought about that? Any reaction to the poll result?
Yes, I would say yes, very good for commercial and civil litigation, very good for family law also. Mm-hmm. Because emotions, relationships, and mediation works very well for family law also. For matrimonial disputes, it's a must. So I would give a higher rating for family law as well.
Let's go ahead and take the polling results off the screen, if you would. Thank you. In the few minutes that we have remaining, what I would like to do is hear from our esteemed colleagues about their views of what this all means going forward. You know, what is the future? And Laila, I'll start with you in terms of what do you see both in terms of CAMP's focus and practice? And really, I know it's a broad question, but I'm going to impose it nonetheless. For the future of online dispute resolution for India, give me a minute or two of your thoughts on that broad topic.
Bruce, I'm very encouraged. If we handle this well, if we as a community understand the difference between virtual mediation, where, as Sriram said, you give them a replicating experience of physical, then most people are going to really integrate technology into their mediations and make the practice so much easier for the parties and for the lawyers. And I can, you know, the world is the playing field for the lawyers and for the mediators. You can mediate from any part of the world. So going forward, when things get better, we'll be combining face-to-face, virtual, online. It will be a happy mix. And I think the practice is going to be so much easier and better for our litigants. They have a good choice that will be available to them. I don't see the practice ever going back to what it was. I see a new kind of practice, and the lawyers have to be ready for that. They should be excited about it, to be able to sit in the luxury of their homes or their offices and conducting so many of their cases through mediation. And for the parties, they don't have to, you know, really struggle the way they've been struggling all these years. So I'm looking forward to that future.
Thank you. Sriram, how about you? That same question. What does the future look like from your perspective? What do you hope it will take shape to become?
Well, I hope it won't go back to the old where I have to struggle, you know, to travel and to meet all kinds of obstacles to get to mediation. So I'm hoping that will not come back. I'm hoping online will stay and will stay powerful. I think it will. You know, it's in now. It's in the system. It's now in people's functions. And, you know, certainly I have no intention of ever going back to what I used to do before. This is not going away from me. Two other things broadly, and this, Bruce, this is to, you know, catch you up on something which we discussed years back, because you asked about the future and developments of mediation. And if you remember, about a few years back, we discussed the need for some very senior people to get into the field of mediation. And so that both the government and industry could see that, you know, we have mediation across all levels, including very senior people. And I'm glad to say that's being done. And soon we'll have some very good presences on the field. The other thing I'm happy to share is that we have devised an online mediation training program. This has been devised by a very fine set of trainers and lawyers. That includes the Jawad and other colleagues, and the group from Bombay called Pre-Solve, who actually it's a young group of lawyers, and they got into online dispute resolution 2 or 3 years ahead of COVID. You know, and they got into ODR firmly saying this is the way to go. And so when COVID started, they had hit the ground running well before. So I reached out to them and said, look, now it's your responsibility to fashion a first-class online mediation training program. So that's been done. That's been vetted by our senior trainers. And I'm glad to say that we're now in a position to present it to the courts, to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court is happy with it, which I'm sure they will then, I think, ask all the high courts in the country to follow this. And so I think we have now a first-class online mediation. I think a regular 4 or 5 day training program. going into all these aspects of the differential and the special communication skills and techniques and technology, tailored what I was talking to you about. The third thing I want to mention is that the emergence now of a full-fledged Center for Mediation Studies, and Research, which has been started by the Bhishma Pitama, the great Chief Justice of our time, Justice Venkatacharya. Under his leadership, we're starting the center. It is going to do long-term, long-range research and training in mediation, allied and new fields. So there's a lot of interesting and wonderful stuff happening, Bruce. So we look forward to your coming to India next. Some things can't be matched. Some things, Bruce, cannot be done online. And that is to sit down with you and have a drink and have a meal and spend time with friends.
I look forward to that connection myself. Laila, you had a comment before I say something?
I just want to add to that. Today, Bruce, Bar Council of India has come out with, there is a mandatory mediation course for our law students. So all our law students are going to compulsorily be having to do a mediation training. And also for the audience, we have another online training which CAMP is also promoting with Bruce Edwards himself as the trainer, which is also another brilliant 40-hour training. So
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And Ram and I are also featuring in that.
The beauty of the online world that we are all now experiencing and promoting includes online opportunities for training and ultimately for mediation. So it's a brave new world that we are all entering. I'll conclude by saying, first of all, I agree with our panelists that the future is bright. We've all been exposed to online mediation now in ways that we previously probably never envisioned. Maybe that's one of the few silver linings from the pandemic environment we find ourselves in. From afar, looking and seeing blue skies over Delhi and different changes in our environments collectively, there's some bright things to think about. But the mediation world is also bright. And if you had asked me a year or two ago if I could have envisioned this, I would have said no. But as I often remind myself, in the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. And here we are in the process of doing. So I encourage everybody to roll up their sleeves and to get involved and to experience this virtual mediation world. Give feedback to your mediators like Laila and Sriram along the way, and together we'll make it the best possible experience we can. I'd like to personally thank both of you for your time this morning, your wisdom. It's personally just delightful to be in your presence even for a short while. And I appreciate the friends at IDEX and CAMP for sponsoring this today. And I wish you all good health and wellness going forward. So thank you for the collaboration. Thank you for the opportunity this morning, both of you.
Thank you, Bruce. That was really wonderful.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Laila. Wonderful to be with both of you.
Yeah. Before we sign out, that was a fantastic session. So many questions that we have not had the chance to get to, but I want to reiterate that the fascinating discussion between Bruce, Sriram, and Laila is what has evoked all these fabulous questions. We will try to respond to each one of them. Thank you so much, Bruce, Laila, and Sriram. This was a fantastic way for us to be able to launch our series. We will be having one every 2 weeks. The next one is on October 8th. It will be a discussion on, again, a fascinating, timely discussion on the mediation law for India and how our practice is going to be changing with this law that is at its cusp. So look forward to having everyone back. And as Bruce pointed out, this is a call out to change this, to make it happen. It's not impossible. And we're looking forward to a new way to be resolving disputes. So thank you all. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, and Tara, all the very best. This is a wonderful new start for you in the United States. You couldn't have started on a better note. Congratulations and all the best.
Thank you so much, Mr. Panchu. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. And Bruce and everyone on the other side of the hemisphere, a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.